And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Friday, January 10th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining. Between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers, we appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day. So any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to talk about for today. So we're actually going to start off the show, believe it or not, by recapping last night's game between Notre Dame and Penn State. Notre Dame won 27-24 to advance to the national championship game. So we'll get into that. I'll also give you my pick for the Ohio State-Texas game. And then also I wanted to bring up briefly in this segment as well that Carson Beck will be entering the transfer portal. So a few things to cover in this topic, but mainly to talk about last night's game between Notre Dame and Penn State because it was a very good game. Then for the remaining segments, we will go through all of the NFL playoff games. So in the second part of the show, I wanted to highlight the Bills-Broncos game because that was the game that I am most intrigued by when I did my rankings yesterday. So we're going to talk about that. Then we'll get into both Saturday games in the third segment. That is the Texans-Chargers game as well as the Ravens-Steelers game. And then in the fourth part of the show, we'll get into the other two Sunday games, two Week 1 rematches, Packers and Eagles and Commanders and Buccaneers. And then in the final part of the show, I will reveal my playoff bracket for the NFL postseason, how I think all the rounds are going to shape out. Now, I did give my Super Bowl prediction before the year started, so now it's all about what happens in between this round and when we get to the big game. So, now let's get into the first topic, which is talking about last night's game between Notre Dame and Penn State. And like I said, entertaining game. Now, did get off to a slow start. It was pretty low scoring, and one of my coworkers was upset because they had a little wager on the over, and it looked like the over was not going to hit. And then at the end of the game, it did end up hitting for them. So, in the first half, not a lot of scoring. Penn State led 10-3 at the half. They were up 10-0. And actually, Riley Leonard, the quarterback for Notre Dame, ended up getting hurt at one point, so he left briefly. I think he was being evaluated for a concussion, so he left briefly. And they had to bring in Steve Angeli, who went 6 of 7 for 44 yards. Now, Notre Dame got 3 points at the end of the first half, and it looked like at one point, it looked like on that drive that Notre Dame fumbled and Penn State recovered. And this is when they were at the Penn State 41-yard line. I don't know how Penn State didn't recover the fumble, because immediately when the play happens, I thought, all right, well, there goes that drive. But Notre Dame ended up recovering. They got into field goal range, and Mitch Jeter, who ended up being the hero of the night, he kicked a 41-yard field goal, and that made it 10-3. But also, if you go back to Penn State when they went up 3-0, they could have had a touchdown. Their running back, Singleton, who had a big game, Nicholas Singleton, he had 3 touchdowns on the night. He dropped a walk-in touchdown. And that would have made it 7-0 Penn State. And, you know, when I was listening to the radio broadcasts for both teams, I forget which, I think it was the Notre Dame postgame. They said, you know, if that ends up being a touchdown, you know, who knows what happens? Does Penn State end up winning the game? Anthony in the chat saying, do you think fans are just emotional right now for Penn State calling for James Franklin to be fired after this loss to Notre Dame? I think so. I mean, Penn State had a really good year. I think they need to, you know, give it a couple weeks. Just gotta calm down. It was a heartbreaking loss. I do agree with that statement. But so that was a big play in the game. Like I said, the drop touchdown by Singleton. So it was 10-3 at the half. Then Notre Dame, they came right out in the second half. They went right down the field, scored a touchdown. Riley Leonard scored a 3-yard rushing touchdown. So that made it 10-10. And then this is when we saw a lot of action from the end of the third quarter on. So then Notre Dame went up 17-10. They went on a 10-play, 71-yard drive. And this was a pretty good touchdown run by Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love, he refused to go down, and he scored. And this is, it's probably one of the better 2-yard rushing touchdowns you'll ever see. Because I thought he was going to be tackled short of the goal line, but he just would not be denied, and he ended up scoring. So that made it 17-10. And then Penn State answered right away. They went 7 plays, 75 yards down the field. Warren, the tight end, he had a big game. 6 receptions for 75 yards. He had a 27-yard catch on that play. And later in the drive, Singleton scored. I think that was his second touchdown of the game. Yeah, that was the second touchdown of the game. So that made it 17-17. And then first play of the Notre Dame's ensuing drive, Riley Leonard throws a pick. And at that point, I thought, well, Penn State's going to win this game probably. And that later led to a Singleton rushing touchdown. Now, Drew Aller had a couple of interceptions that got called back because of penalties, and one of them happened on this drive. He threw an interception in the end zone, and there was a pass interference call. And I think it was the right call because I was listening to the Notre Dame postgame at that point, and they said, that was a bit of a questionable call. And Anthony says, do you agree with that PI call that the ref called in favor of Tyler Warren where the Notre Dame DB didn't even touch him? Well, if that was the one where, the defensive back for Notre Dame had his back turned, yeah, I do think that was the right call. Because he wasn't looking at the ball. So I did agree with if that was the second one, because I know that happened twice. I know if you're talking about the second one, I did agree with the call. But yeah, so that led to a touchdown. That was Singleton's third touchdown, so that made it 24-17. And then Notre Dame answered. They went 7 plays, 81 yards, and Riley Leonard connected with Greathouse for 54 yards. 2 players on Penn State's defense, they both fell. So that helped out Notre Dame on that. So that tied the game. Both teams punted, and then this was Aller's interception that stood, and he had pressure coming, and he threw it into the middle of the field. It gets picked off, and Notre Dame ends up getting into field goal range. Mitch Jeter for the 41-yard field goal. It was good, and Notre Dame ends up winning the game. Like I said, it's very it's a slow start, but the fourth quarter there was a lot of action. And Notre Dame is going to the national championship game for the first time in a decade, they said. So good for them. They have come a long way, because I remember in our production meeting, we talked about them after they lost to Northern Illinois the second week of the season. But they have come a long way since then, and they will be awaiting the matchup, or the winner of the matchup between Texas and Ohio State. But that was a fun game to watch. Tough loss for Penn State. Aller's going to have to live with that pick. And he's one of those guys that I think was on the fence of declaring for the draft, depending on how he did. But he was not great last night. His stats on the night, he finished 12 of 23 for 135 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. But Nicholas Singleton, 15 carries, 84 yards, 3 touchdowns. Allen, their other running back, he had 82 yards on the ground. Penn State, 204 yards rushing in this game. And then for Notre Dame, Riley Leonard, he went 15 to 23 for, he had 1 touchdown and 2 picks, 223 yards. Notre Dame ran the ball for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jaden Greathouse stepped up, 7 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown. And yeah, they get the win. Anthony said, no, I saw that play again. The guy who intercepted the ball was the one that got called for the pass interference, not the guy who was guarding Warren. Oh. See, that I didn't know. But, I mean, there was pass. Well, I think they meant to call it on the guy that was interfering with Warren, but That might just be me. Anthony also said, I talked to a lot of people who are my friends that are Penn State fans, and they want Franklin to be fired because of the fact that not just this loss, but his overall record against top 25 teams. I see, off the top of my head, I don't know what the record is, but if it's not good, then I understand why they're frustrated. But they had the game. Listen, they were up by 7 points, and then you had the two defenders fall. Greathouse scores that touchdown, and then Aller throws the pick. And that ended their season. So I get it. It's frustrating. And I had Penn State winning this game. I thought this was going to be a lower score. I mean, looked like it was going to be a lower scoring game. But I did want to see the Big Ten championship, a possible Big Ten national championship game between Penn State and Ohio State. So it looks like we're not getting that. But Notre Dame is a good team. Respect to them. But let's get into now these last couple of minutes here at the top of the show here. So I do have Ohio State winning tonight, and some people are probably rolling their eyes and being like, oh, no surprise there. They are playing really good right now. That Michigan game is in the past now. They look good. I mean, they beat the number one team in the country in Oregon with ease. They just look like a different team right now. They look like the team of destiny at the moment. So I like their chances. Texas, hasn't played great in these first two games. They won both. They beat Clemson and they beat the Sun Devils, but they could have lost to the Sun Devils. So I just think Ohio State is playing better right now, and I think they should win. But we'll see. I think it's going to be a good game regardless. And then I just wanted to bring up that Carson Beck is entering the transfer portal. Did not play in the college football playoff. He was injured. And I guess, again, another guy that was going to declare for the draft, but now he enters free agency, and we'll see where he ends up going. I saw that Miami might be a possible destination for him. So we'll see if he can, he's got one more year, and, if he goes out and has a good year, then his stock is going to be up for the following NFL draft. But, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up as well. Anthony also says, I'm sticking to my guns. I have Texas and Notre Dame in the national championship game with Notre Dame winning by 3 points. You might end up being right because, sometimes when I go one way, the opposite happens. But it should be a good game tonight. But, yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, about the game from last night. Who do you think is going to win the Texas-Ohio State game? And also, any thoughts on Carson Beck entering the transfer portal? So we are going to take our first break of the show now. And then when we come back, we'll talk about the Bills-Broncos game. Can the Broncos upset the Bills? We'll get into that when we return. I'll give you my prediction for the game when we come back. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.